Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing e-commerce application from scratch using Angular and Spring Boot. In the last session we discussed on how we can create one new API so that we can register new user in our e-commerce application. Now in this session we are going to see how we can create a form so that we can take some details from the user, and we are going to see how we can call the API that we have created in the last session itself. So before continuing with this session, I will request you to go through the last session so that you will get to know like how to create the API for the register. So if I just go to the Postman, and if I just try to show you like what we have created in the last session itself. So in the last session we created this register new user API, and we have to pass some this will be the post request, and we have to pass the JSON in this particular form that we have seen over here. So we have to pass the details in something like this. So let me just take you to the VS Code, and over here the very first thing that we have to do is we have to create one new component. So like the component that we have created for a login, similar to this we have to create a component for the register as well. So let me just open the terminal and let me just stop the application which is currently running. So let me just use the command that is npm run ng gc and register component. So let me just use register as a name, and let me just give a movement so that it will create the component. And now in a register component, what we have to do is we have to go to the HTML file, and over here we have to add some logic, or not a logic, but we have to add some HTML lines so that form will be populated on a UI. But before that we have to like create a link, create a path for this component that we have just created. So let me just go to the app routing module TS file, and over here let me just try to create one path. So let me just do one thing, let me just give a comma, and let me just use path, and let me just give the path as, let's suppose, register. You can give any name basically. So component will be the register component, and we don't have to use these can activate, and we don't have to use this data as well, because we don't want to put any kind of security on this component. So we are just keeping it as it is. So we are not going to put any kind of auth card or any kind of JWT mechanism on this. So on the API side as well, we haven't applied any kind of security, because like anyone who is using your application can register into your application, right? And that is the reason we are not allowing any kind of security on this component. The next thing that we have to do is we have to just decide like where we want to place the button or link so that this register form will get populated. So I think, let me first of all just start the application. So let me just use npm run start, and let me just wait till the application is running. So meanwhile what I'm trying to say is I think whenever we are clicking on the login button, the login form will get populated. So let me just wait. Yes. So now if I just come to the application, and if I'm just clicking on the login button, so this particular login form gets populated. So what I'm thinking is I'm just trying to put, I'm just thinking to put a link below this login button, so that whenever user will click on that link, then register form will get populated. So this is how I'm thinking. If you have any different area where you want to put the link, or where you want to put the register form, you can just go ahead with that logic. But as of now I just want to keep every single thing as simple as possible. That is the reason I'm just going in this way. So let me just go back to the login component, and over there let me just go to the HTML, and inside the HTML what I just need to do is I just need to use, maybe I'm just trying to think on the button side only. So let me just try to use one button. So let me just go to the form, and over here let me just try to put one button after the form. So let me just use button, and type is equals to button, and let me just give the link as create an account, something like this. and let me just give the class like mat raised button. So we are using the Angular material as well, so I'm just using the mat raised button. And if you just want to know how we can use Angular material in our project, you can just check out by clicking over here. And also there is one official document, like official site, material.angular.io. You can go to that site and you will get to know like how how we can use like different buttons, different cards, and every single thing. Like there are multiple UI components. You will get to know document for every single component that is listed over here. Now let me just come back to the Google Chrome and let's see. So let me just come back to the Google Chrome and let's see how the button is looking like. So button is looking something like this, and we just want some space between the login and our create account button. So let me just add some BR tag over here. You can just add a margin top as well, but let me just add a BR tag as of now. And yes, now it is looking perfectly fine. And there is one more thing, like I'm not happy with the width of this button, because if you just see, it is like acquiring like 100% of the width. I just want to keep it like bit small. Let's see how we can do this. So over here, if I just try to apply some class, let's see how it looks like first. I'm not sure whether it will be a good idea or not, but let's see how it will look like. Okay, so it is not reflecting, like whatever class we are applying, it is not reflecting. So the reason is, what I'm trying to think is, like we have used one card over here, and card itself, inside a card we have used a form, and inside a card only we are just trying to put our button. But let me just try to take this button outside of this card. Let's see what happens then. And if I just go to the Google Chrome, and yes, if you just take button outside of the card, then you will get this kind of width, like whatever class you have applied, that kind of width it will just take. So w-20 is nothing but a bootstrap class. So w-100 means 100% of the width, w-20 means 20% of the available width. So this is how it will look like. So let me just do one thing. Let me just take one division, and inside the division let me just put these two buttons, these two tags, like BRN button, and let me just apply one class, that is text center. So text center is again a bootstrap class. Let's see. And yes, if you just see, when you apply text center class, then it will take button at the center of the like it will just take the button at the center. Now whenever we are clicking on this button, what we want is, we just want to open the new component that we just created. So for this, let me just add click event. So let me just use click event, and let me just give the function name as register user, something like this. And this function is not present, so we have to create it. So let me just copy the function name that we have used over here, and now let me just go to the TS file of it. So let me just go to the TS file of login component, and then let me just paste the name, and let me just give this body of this function. Now over here we have already injected the router. If you just see, we have already injected the router, and we are already navigating to the admin or user tabs. So similarly, we can just copy this particular line, and if your router is not injected, you can just inject it in a constructor, and this router basically comes from @angular/router. Now let me just do one thing. Let me just use this.router.navigate, and let me just use /register. So we have to make sure that we are just using the path name exactly same that we have configured in our app routing module TS file. So we can just copy it and we can just paste it over here, and make sure you are just giving a slash as well. So we have to give /register, something like this. And now let me just save the changes, and let's see what it's how it works on the UI. So whenever I'm clicking on the create new button, and now if you just see, it is going to the register component, something like this. Now it is working as expected. Now we want to work on this register component. So what we can just do is, we can just design one form as well, If you want to take the reference, we have already created the form in a login component TS, so you can just you can just take a reference from our login component TS and login component HTML files. Whatever you want, you can just take a references from that. And now let me just go to the register component, register.component.html. Over here we just want to add some logic, so let me just use dot container. So dot container is basically a shortcut. So whenever you will use dot a container or dot any kind of bootstrap class name, it will create one division and it will apply the class that you have mentioned over here, something like this. Inside a container we again want a card, so let me just use a card, and inside a card we just want a padding of 20, so we just want to give p-20. So p means padding and -20 is a value. So this is again a bootstrap class. Inside this inside this division we have to give all the form fields. So let me just first of all give a form, and action, let me just remove it, we don't want action right now. Inside this form tag we have to apply all the form fields. So again I'm just using a Angular material form fields. If you want, you can just go to the Angular material site and you will get to know like what are the different form fields and how you can use it. You will get the examples as well. If you just click on the view code, it will just give you the code as well. Otherwise, in our application itself, in a login we have used it, so you can just use it from there as well. So if you just see, it is pretty simple. You have to use it something like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it, because I have already explained every single thing, and I'll just copy it and I'll just paste it over here, and also I will just explain every single thing that we have pasted, but this is how we have to use it. So mat form field is basically a tag which is for Angular material form field. Inside this we have to give the appearance as an outline. So there are multiple appearance, you can just check. So this one is kind of having the appearance as, if you just see, this is the having appearance as a fill. The second form field is having the appearance as an outline. So there are multiple values. If you want, you can just use a fill or maybe any different like form field, whichever you like, you can just use it. Then we have the label. The label is something something similar to this one. So if you just click on it, so you will be able to see this particular label like outline form field, something like we are just using the username. Then we have to use input. Input is basically a HTML tag, and then we have to just use mat input. Then we have to use ng model. So ng model is really very important here, because whatever value which will be inserted into this form field, that value we want to send back to the API, and to access the value we have to give the ng model. So make sure you are just giving the ng model that we have used, something like this. After that, the name and ID is really very important. So make sure you can just go to the IntelliJ and you can just open your entity class. So let me just open my user entity class, and whichever name, like for the username, whichever key or variable name we have used, make sure exactly same name you are using as your input field name and input field ID. So make sure you are just giving exactly same exactly same name and ID that you have used at your backend. So make sure this is really very important thing that you have to make sure. And now again let me just save the code. Let's see how it looks like on the UI first. And if you just see, it is looking perfectly fine. So yes, as of now the padding is not applied over there, so we can just check that out, like why padding is not applied, but our form field is looking perfectly fine. Similar to this one form field, we have to add few more. So what we have to do is we have to add 4 form fields. First one will be for the username, second one will be for the first name, then third one for the last name, and fourth one for the password. So we want 4 form fields. So let me just do one thing. Let me just try to copy it and paste it again, and this time let me just try to change username to first name, and for the name and ID let me just go back to the IntelliJ let me just copy the user first name and let me paste it as a name and ID. For the placeholder, let me just use first name, something like this, and for the hint also, let me just use a first name, something like this. Next thing, again, let me just copy this form field and let me just paste it over here, and this time let me just give it as a last name. Then for the name and ID, let me just go back to the IntelliJ, let me just copy it and let me paste it over here, something like this. And we have to use a last name as a placeholder, and again let me just copy it and let me just give it as a hint as well. And then lastly, let me just copy it again and let me paste it over here, and we just want it for the password, so let me just use password as a label. Then let me just use this password as a placeholder and as a hint as well. And for the name and ID, let me again go back to the IntelliJ, let me just copy it and let me just paste it, something like this. And now let me save all the changes. Let's see what happens on the browser. And if you just see, we are able to see the four form fields: username, first name, last name, and password. Now let me just see why padding is not applied over there. So let me just go back and let me just see p-20. So over here, let me just go to the login component. Okay, so over here we have used a style, so similarly we can just apply a style tag itself. I'm not sure p-20 why it is not working, so let me just use padding, and padding is equals to 20 pixel, something like this. And now if you just see, the padding is applied. Now what we want is, if you just see, like the card is basically attached to our toolbar, so we want some margin from top as well. So let me just come back, and for the container, let me just apply margin, that is empty-5. so empty means margin top, -5 is a value. And again, this is a bootstrap class, and yes, it is working perfectly fine. And now we just want one button so that user can click on it and user can register into a system. So let me just apply one button as well inside a form only. So let me just apply button, type is equals to submit, and let me just give it as a let me just give the value as a register. So yes, now let's see what happens on the UI. So if you just see, like the button is not looking quite good, so we can apply some styles as well. So we can again use matte raised button. So again, matte raised button is nothing but a like it is like Angular material UI style. There are multiple button types. You can just go to the documentation and you will get to know that what are the different buttons that you can use. So whichever you like, you can just use it over there. Now let me just come to the HTML file again, and let me just paste it like matte raised button. We have to paste this attribute, and we have to give color is equals to primary. So primary means a blue color which is like we have used in our application. Now let me just come back, and yes, it is looking perfectly fine. Now what we can just do is, we can just give width as 100% to this button, or we can just take it to the center. So if you just want to take it to the center, you have to just take one division, and you have to just apply one class as a text center, and you can just copy this button, or you can just cut this button and you can just paste it inside the division. So yes, it will be at the center. And if you just want it to like take 100% of the width, then you have to apply the class as w-100. So it will just take 100% of the width. So whichever you want, you can just keep it like this, but I'm just going to remove it, like I'm just going to remove this class w-100. And now the one thing that we have left back is, like whenever we are clicking on this button, what we want is, we just want to call one function which will call our API. So for this, what we have to do is, we have to just use the form tag, and over here we have to just give the name to this form tag. So how we can give the name? We can just use it as a hash register form is equals to ng form, something like this. And again, if you just wanted references, you can just go to our login component.html and you will get the line over here. And we can just copy this ng submit and we can just paste it, something like this. But we just want to change the method or function name, so let me just use it as a register, and whatever form we have to just pass that form over here, something like this. And now let me just save all the changes. Now this register function is not yet present, so we have to create it. So let me just do one thing, let me just copy this register along with its parameter, and now let me just go to the ts file of it, like register.component.ts file, and let me just paste this. And now we can just give the function body. Now inside the function, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use console.log, and what I'm going to do is we can just give some type to this register form. So register form will be of type ng form, so we can just give it. And over here inside console.log, we can just use register form dot value, like this. And let's see first of all like what kind of values it basically prints on a console. So let me just open the console, and let me just give the username as Raj123, first name as my name, and last name as again some name, password as 12345. And now let me click on a register. Now if you just see, it is printing all the values. You can just re-verify the values whether all the values are correct or not. In my case, it is looking perfectly fine. So what we can just do is we can just create one service, or maybe we can just use the existing service, and inside that we have to create one function which will call the API, and we can just pass all these values to that API. So for this, let me again just come back to the VS Code, and over here let me just use our service that we have created previously. So we can just use this user .service.ts, and what we can just do is we can just apply one we can just add one function over there. So let me just add one function which is like public, and let me just use register, public register, and we can just give it as a register data, something like this. And what we can just do is we can just use return this.http client dot, this will be a post call. That is the reason we have to use a post call. And then we can just give a path of API, so we can just use this dot path of API. So path of API basically contains the base URL. You can just use this URL, or whichever URL in your case you can just use it. And we can just append our endpoint name. So my endpoint name will be the slash, let me just go to the Postman, and it will be like slash register new user. So let me copy it and let me paste it over here. And after this we have to pass the second parameter, which is our data that we want to send through the body, so we can just use it. And now everything looks perfectly fine. And now let me just do one thing, let me just save the code, and this user service we have to inject in our register component.ts file. So let me just use private user service, which will be of type user service. And now inside our register, what we can just do is we have to just use this dot user service dot register, and what we have to do is we have to just pass register form dot value. So make sure you are just adding dot value over here. Then we have to just use subscribe. Now the subscribe will take two different callbacks. So first one will be for success response, so we can just use response, then arrow function, something like this, and then comma, and we can just use one response or one callback for a error. If at all anything goes wrong, if at all we face any kind of error, then this particular error block will get executed. So we can just use console.log and we can print that particular error, something like this. and we can print the response as well as of now. So let me just use RESP response, something like this. And now let me save all the changes. Let me just go to the Chrome and let me just first of all open the console, and now we can just try to put some values, Raj123, or instead of Raj123, because Raj123 is already present, we can just use maybe something like ABC12 as a username, and then Raj as a first name, then Patil as a last name, and password will be the 12345. And now let me click on the register, and now if you just see, we are getting the response, and inside the response we are getting like the username, password, the first name, last name, and alongside, and one more thing, like if you just see the password is in the encrypted format, so we are not able to read it now. And if you just open the role array, you will be able to see that we have applied the role, which is a normal user role, to these to this user that we have just created. So everything is looking perfectly fine, and we are able to achieve what we want. The only thing that I want is, whenever user will be registered into the application, I just want the user to be redirected to the login page. So for this, what we can just do is we can just inject a router. So let me just use private, then router, which will be of type router, like this. And inside a response block, we just want this dot router dot navigate, and we can just use the array, and we have to just give the path. So let me just go to the app routing module TS, and let me just find out a path for login. So it will be a login only, so we have to just give /login, something like this. And now we can just remove this particular console.log. So now we have to just make sure that everything is working perfectly fine, and we will just check it by placing the order. And for this, let me just use username as A12. This is my username. As of now, we don't have any kind of validations on the form, so make sure you are filling every single thing. In the upcoming session, we are going to see how we can add the validation, but at least for now we don't have any validation. Let me give the name as Harsh, and let me give the last name as let's suppose Patil again. Password will be the 1234. So A12 is my username and 1234 is my password. Let me click on the register, and yes, we are now redirected to the login page. So now let me just try to log in with A12, and password will be 1234. Yes, we are able to log in. Now let me just do one thing. Let me just click on the home page, and let me just go to the third pending combo 3, and let me just try to place the order, and let me just give the full name again. So let me just give it as a Harsh only, Harsh. Full address will be the Pune. Contact number will be something like this. You can put any random contact number. As of now, as I said, we don't have any kind of validations. And quantity will be the 3. And now let me just click on the place order. So order is placed successfully, and it will get delivered in a 4 to 5 business days. Now only thing that we can just do is we can just go to our database, and we can just verify whether order is placed successfully with the username or not, because while placing the order we are using the username internally, so we can just verify that. So let me just go to the order detail, and at the last let me just try to expand this. So okay, so yes, so order number 32, we can just check that out. Harsh, Pune, and order status is placed, amount is 3450, and if you just see, username is A12. So it is working perfectly fine, and we are able to get the username as expected in the database table as well. So we are able to achieve what we want, and we are able to register the user, and we are able to place the order with the registered user as well. So I hope you got an idea around this, like how we can create a form and how we can register the new user into our application If you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section and I will try my best to help you out in that case. And I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you in the next session.